Let's get to our number 4 guy in this class. A guy that I think, Dalton, you and I are still very high on and people should not forget about in this class. That is Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback from Notre Dame. He was a guy, Dalton, that we had as our number 2 corner in the nation heading into the year behind Will Johnson. Unfortunately, injuries kind of hampered him this past year, but still, he has elite tape for over his 3 years.
Yeah, we kind of have to explain this a little bit because he's not going to be the 4th corner drafted.
No.
But if we know he's healthy, big if, especially when you're talking about a hip surgery, that's big stuff. If he's healthy, I think this is clearly probably the spot for him, is the 4th best corner and a potential top 25 player in this draft. He's so smooth in coverage. I mean, you talk about just a technician back there at Notre Dame, a team that plays a lot of man coverage. He's not as big as some of these other press man corners we've talked about, but he's got the best technique out of the ones we've talked about so far. Works to get to the receiver's hands when he can't get his eyes back to the quarterback. When he can't find the football, find the hands, and there's very few guys in this class better at that than Morrison. Now, he's not all that physical. Obviously, the injury is a concern, and that I think what you talk about when we're putting this list together of who are the most talented guys, who are the best players versus where they will get drafted, it is different because the injury might knock Morrison down to 8 or 9 on some people's boards if they're concerned with it. I'm with you. I'm going talent alone here. I think his style. I think Kamari Lassiter was a little more physical at Georgia when it came to tackling, even though it wasn't A+, but his style reminds me a lot of Kamari Lassiter. And I'd say last year I had him CB6 in last year's draft, and he had a very, very good rookie season. I think that's the type of player that you're talking about, a guy who can play in any coverage, especially in man coverage, is not afraid of anybody, who can get to the football, who knows how to get his eyes to the football or to the receiver's hands when it's those contested situations. So Ben Morrison, top 25 talent. Injury situation could bump him to the 2nd or maybe, who knows, maybe even the early 3rd rounds, depending. The medicals are obviously huge, but on talent alone, I think he's a top 4 corner in this class. I'm with that.
On talent alone, I think he is in the grouping with the next 3 we're talking about here. I think he's in that mix, and you could put him anywhere, I think, in that mix. Actually, Dalton, we have our guy Drake in the chat. He was saying, if that hip is 100%, Ben Morrison is my CB1 in this draft. I don't know if I'll go that high, but
considering the guy at the top that we have,
but I don't hate it though, and I appreciate Drake. We know Drake's a big ball here.
We came into the season, right, and this was even before Travis Hunter just had a ridiculous year at corner. But you mentioned it, him and Will Johnson. And
it was 1A, 1B.
Even the grading of their first 2 seasons were darn near in coverage, at least identical between him and Will Johnson. Similar players. I think we had Johnson just a hair ahead because he's a little more physical in the run game and with tackling, but Ben Morrison is a premier talent. I mean, and the fact that Notre Dame lost him and still made the Natty without him, it just tells you how much Notre Dame has. It's not about Morrison. They got more coming. Don't you worry.
Well, they have the number 1 corner in college football, returning to college football going to next year. A little teaser for the article.
Preview in the article. See it. Go read for the rest of the top 10.
Little teaser for that. That guy is a freak, and we'll actually get into that guy in our all eligible mock draft we do in a couple weeks.
Darn right we will. I mean, look, Morrison though, if he were healthy, and it's a great point Drake made, because the talent is pretty darn close to that level, at least of the next 2 guys we're going to talk about. Yep. The last one, of course, at number 1, is that's a whole different thing. But Morrison's really talented, and I think this is somebody who, if there's a team out there that trusts the medicals, and if he does fall to mid to late 2nd round to the right team and he's fine, you're getting a steal.
Yep.
This is a darn good football player.
I had him also in that article of how teams can ace the draft. I had him to, I think, the Falcons in the 2nd round, being like, they get James Pierce Jr. in the 1st round, we get Ben Morrison in the 2nd round.
Yeah,
you're cooking with gas.
Those
there.
are the 2 things you look at: edge player, defense, and corner. Just like you mentioned with the Commanders, where you go. That's the 2 things, and sometimes you have to take a risk like that. And it might work, it might not. It's less of a risk in the 2nd round. Again, is Morrison going to be the 4th corner drafted? Probably not. I would highly doubt it.
He's CB8 consensus board right now.
That might be the case when it comes to where he's getting mocked and where he actually
48
goes.
Overall,
and we might be, and that 48 would be in the low to mid 20s if we knew he was healthy.
Yeah,
I don't have any
top
question
20.
about that.
Honestly, I think
no question.
I think this class, if he was fully healthy, he would be in the top 15 to 20 range with the next three guys that we're talking about are in right now. But just kind of remind you guys how good Ben Morrison was over his first 2 years of college football. First of all, an elite athlete. He scored above the 99th percentile on our GAS metric as just a true freshman. 80-plus coverage grades in each of his freshman and sophomore years at Notre Dame. Very, very smart player overall. Excellent ball skills. 7 interceptions in his first 2 years of college football. And he had an 86.8 single coverage grade in his first 2 years. That was among the best in the nation in single coverage, with a 90.4 coverage grade across his first 2 years. And against Marvin Harrison Jr., who was a sophomore and junior when he went up against Ben Morrison. Ben Morrison was a freshman and sophomore, so he was a year younger than Marvin Harrison Jr. He went up against him, and he guarded him a lot in those 2 matchups against Ohio State. In those 2 matchups, he had 7 targets against Marvin Harrison Jr. On those 7 targets, 2 catches allowed, 3 forced incompletions. So he went up against some elite talent at wide receiver, and he more than held his own. He actually dominated Marvin Harrison Jr., I would say, on those reps. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the better receivers we've ever seen in college football, at least in this century. And Ben Morrison still was very, very good against Marvin Harrison Jr. So do not forget about Ben Morrison. Now, of course, the torn labrum in his hip will be a massive, massive question mark. Like, if the medicals don't check out, Dalton and I probably won't even have him in top 10. Which is unfortunate, right? But if the medicals do check out, he is absolutely at least number 4 on this list. He only played 6 games last year. Now, on the field, besides the torn labrum in his hip, not the best tackler right now, not the most physical player overall. Only a 68.4 coverage grade this past year in 6 games, so enough of a sample size to really look at it. So not the best year as a junior before going down with that injury. And then only 30 3/8 inch arms as well. It's only 14th percentile. So not ideal for a press corner, even though he's really good everywhere else as a press corner. Again, not the strongest player overall in the class in terms of run defense or getting off blocks. But if he stayed fully healthy, I really do think this guy would be a top 20 pick, like Travis Hunter, like Will Johnson, like Jahdae Barron. He would be in that classification of those corners if he stayed fully healthy. Instead, what I think he will be, if the hip checks out, he'll be one of the biggest steals of the 2025 NFL draft because of how good he was in his first 2 years of college football. Again, big if that hip checks out. It's a big, big if. But if it does check out, you get him in the mid-second round, you're getting a top 20 talent in the mid-second round. So you'd be one of the bigger steals that we have in the draft. So we're both huge fans of Ben Morrison. Do not forget about that guy because he is absolutely a stud, and just hopefully the hip injury can check out for him. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.